This first story is animated by Migrad. It may contain some sound effects, so feel free to jump ahead to the next story to avoid that. Do you believe in ghosts? The question feels simple until it isn't. It's not really about specters or whispers in the dead of night. It's about the cracks in reality. The places where the seams don't quite hold. Some people say ghosts are the remnants of a soul too stubborn or too broken to let go. And this story is one of those instances. I work in a large building, part storefront, part warehouse, and it's usually bustling during the day, but at night it's a different story. Walkie-talkies keep us connected, but on slow nights like this, they stay silent for hours. Normally I'm in the inventory office, tucked away in the back of the building. A coworker was on the sales floor helping the occasional customer, and the others were in their offices doing who knows what. The hum of machinery echoed faintly through the halls, and it was almost complete silence. And days like this have a habit of lulling me into a sort of sense of calm. It felt like the world had shrunk to just this building, this quiet, hollow space. It would be just enough to send anyone into a state of sleep. If only that was the biggest issue that we faced that night. The sound had come from right outside my office. Immediately, the calm energy of the store was gone, and I was completely frozen for a moment. I thought maybe one of my coworkers was in trouble, and I didn't have time to think, and my instincts immediately took over. I was expecting the worst, but instead I was just left confused. Just darkness. And that scream, still echoing in my ears like it had been etched into my very bones. I remembered a story that I'd heard when I'd started here. My coworker swore that the building was haunted. A woman screaming for help. I thought it was just some hazing, but now I wasn't so sure. A chill ran up my spine.
Did anyone else hear that?
My coworker's voice cracked with fear. One by one, we all chimed in. We'd heard it, clear as day. No distortion, no interference. One of us whispered what we were all thinking. It came from our line of devices. But the walkies, they were all accounted for. Her scream still haunts me. It wasn't just a sound, it was a plea, a fragment of a life torn apart. Whatever happened to her, she's still here, trapped, reliving it over and over. And now, so are we. I was around 6 when it happened. My parents had tucked me in for bed. I live in the rural countryside, so nighttime is very quiet, no sounds of cars. It's usually very peaceful. I was laying on my back when suddenly I heard the sound of long nails scratching the wood under my bed. The reason this incident sticks out to me is because I can still remember the feeling of my heart dropping out of my stomach and feeling paralyzed with fear. I was about to call out for my parents when my dad crawled out from under my bed and stood up in the dark, looking at me. He says, "You forgot to say your prayers," and then walked out of my room. I was understandably shocked. I did not leave my bed afterwards and must have fallen asleep at some point. My dad would normally tell me to say my prayers before bed, so this seemed like something he would say, but I have no idea what would possess him to hide under my bed. And when I asked my dad later, he denies ever doing this. I brought it up numerous times over the years, but he has never admitted to doing it. And I never really considered until recently that he definitely doesn't have nails long enough to make the deep scratching sound that I heard. What do you guys think? Maybe I fell asleep and had a vivid dream. I also consider it to be something paranormal, though. And to answer a few questions that I saw frequently, no, I can't remember if I asked my parents about the incident the next morning, but since then I have asked repeatedly over the last 20-ish years and my dad has never owned up to it. And I believe at this point that my dad couldn't have done it because, 1, my dad likes scary stuff and would absolutely take credit for a prank that scared me so bad, and 2, my parents had been gone from my room for probably about 10 minutes before I heard that scratching. It's possible that my father could have just stayed behind, but he could not easily fit under my bed without me noticing. And 3, he's not really a drinker, so I doubt that he was passed out on the floor or something. I'd like to believe that it was sleep paralysis like many of you have theorized, however, that would be my one and only time experiencing that. There's definitely a chance that it could have been something more sinister, and it's something that I hope I never encounter again. I'm in my 30s, and I've had a few of what I believe to be paranormal experiences. Both of my parents served in the military, which led to me growing up in many different homes all over Europe and the United States. When I was about 15 years old, my family and I lived in a really old house in Portugal. I believe that I was being haunted by an entity that lived in the closet in my room. This was my first paranormal experience. But once we moved back to the United States, I decided that what I thought I was experiencing in the old house in Portugal was just my imagination, and I didn't think about it again until years later. Fast forward 8 years, I landed a job as a state park ranger at a park that included a historic site. At the time, I was already a park ranger at another park, and I remember my coworkers telling me, "Oh, you're transferring to the creepy cult park?" I laughed it off. I genuinely was not considering the fact that the historic buildings could be haunted. I really enjoyed learning about history and was only thinking about how lucky I was to be working there. On my first day at the creepy cult park, a volunteer gave me a full tour of the historic site. When the cult was at its peak, there were over 100 buildings. Now only 13 buildings remain. We had already entered 3 of the buildings, and the words haunted or ghost still hadn't crossed my mind. That was until we went into the old bakery. We were on the first floor. Park visitors could look through the glass window at the doorway to see all the artifacts that were there when the bakery was in full operation. But we had a key to get inside the building. At this point, everything felt normal while taking a look around the first floor. The volunteer then started to lead me to the stairwell where only park employees could go. I was in the front and made it halfway up the stairs, and all of a sudden, there it was. The same kind of feeling I had when I was a teenager in Portugal. I asked the volunteer, "Do I have to go up there?" And she seemed annoyed and said, "Oh, you're one of those?" "One of what?" I asked. "One of those people that believe in ghosts?" I didn't know how to answer her. I was new and didn't want to start off on the wrong foot. I had been a park ranger for years, but never at a historic site. I responded, "I don't know if it's a ghost, but I got a bad feeling, and I really don't want to go up there." She rolled her eyes and said, "Let's move on to the founder's home." We toured about 5 more buildings after that. I had that uneasy feeling in all of them, but I assumed it was just me still thinking about the experience I had at the bakery. 2 weeks later, I had a week of morning field shifts. One of my tasks during this shift was unlocking and disarming the buildings before the park opened. I had done this on my own a few times and really only got that eerie feeling when opening the bakery. Luckily, going upstairs was not a requirement. But on this particular day, I had opened 6 buildings before arriving at the founder's home, as in the home of the founder of the cult. When you walked inside the founder's home, you could see 2 old wooden staircases on either side of the room leading upstairs. Underneath those staircases were storage closets, and one of them was where the security system was installed. When you opened the main door to the building, an alarm would go off, and you had to use the skeleton key to open the main door, then quickly grab a different key to unlock the door under the staircase to disarm the alarm. You only had 1 minute to disarm the alarm before the cops were notified, so I was focused on looking for my second key while walking inside the building. As I was walking toward the closet, hearing the loud alarm going off in the background, I found my next set of keys, looked up, and there it was. A silhouette of someone standing there, staring at me. But he had no features. He was a shadow. I froze. I felt like I couldn't breathe. For those of you who have not experienced something like this before, it is literally a sixth sense. Your body does not know how to respond because it doesn't know what the hell it's looking at. The figure stood there for only 1 or 2 seconds, then ran up the set of stairs to the right at an unnatural speed. I dropped my keys and yelled an expletive and ran outside. I paced the porch a few times trying to catch my breath and thought, damn it, I have to alert the ranger at the ranger station that no one broke into the founder's home. I radioed the ranger station to let them know that I was just late in disarming the alarm, and my coworker said, "It's okay, it happens sometimes, just disarm it and finish opening the parks. Come up to the ranger station when you're done." When I got to the ranger station, my coworker didn't lecture me like I thought he might. Instead, he just said, "You saw something, didn't you?" And I was shocked and relieved at the same time. He had been working there for almost 20 years, and he told me he wanted me to come to my own conclusions about the buildings being haunted before sharing all of his experiences with me. Knowing that some of the other rangers and volunteers felt the same way I did about the building being just downright creepy made me feel a lot better, even if that meant that the other half of the staff thought that I was paranoid. But I don't care. I know what I saw. I worked at that park for 5 more years after that, and I have many, many stories to tell, and maybe I'll submit another one if you're interested. Alright, I've reached the point where I can't keep this to myself anymore. I need a semi-anonymous place to get it off my chest so I can just move on. I was part of a trio of best friends. We hung out socially pretty regularly, and one of our favorite things to do was have a girls' night out at the local clubs. We always started at one of our least favorite clubs, but it had one of those inexpensive fishbowl drinks, so we typically began our evening there. And that's where it happened. We had arrived and were about 30 to 45 minutes into conversation and drinks when we decided to hit the dance floor. A group of 3 guys was seated near the dance floor and joined us once we started. I ended up paired with the youngest looking one. He seemed about 5 years younger than me, but we were having a great time dancing together. We danced and eventually merged back with the group, forming a circle. Directly across from my dance partner and me was my friend. She was laughing and smiling, dancing and enjoying herself, and then, boom. It was like a hologram or a shifting picture, like tuning an image. Suddenly she stood well over our heads, and my dance partner looked about 5'11", and she was a clear head and shoulders taller than him. And this is the part that I have the hardest time saying without ridiculing myself for not having an answer. And please, I struggle to even say it to myself, but she was a reptile. A standing, scale-covered, muscular, human-like creature with a dinosaur/human-shaped head. My dance partner and I both froze. I felt stuck, just staring, willing myself to stop. When I turned to look at him, the color had drained from his face, and I felt so bad for the fear that I saw on him. And without a word to each other, we both took a step back, turned, and fled outside. He kept walking, completely left the club and didn't say a word, just walked off. He left his friends there and was gone. I went back inside because I thought that it had to be the lighting, the shadows, something practical. After all, I knew this person. We were friends, best friends at the time, and clearly I was the crazy one and needed to understand what had just happened. I sat at a table near the dance floor and watched the whole room, the lighting, the effects, the shadows, my friends dancing, and I told myself that it had to be an optical illusion, a terrifying one, but it could have been real. I knew this person. I wasn't prone to hallucinations or fantasies, so I must have been the one who misinterpreted something, my brain filling in the wrong information. It unsettled me so much that I decided not to continue the night out. I said goodbye to our other friend and went home, and as soon as I got there, I searched the internet for anyone who had experienced anything remotely similar, but I found nothing. At this point, I tried and have continued to try to convince myself it was the room, the lights, the strobe effect, something that made my best friend look like a 7-foot-tall reptilian person. I avoided them for a month after that. The next time I saw her, I thought she'd find it funny that I ghosted everyone because she shapeshifted. But she didn't find it funny. She seemed worried and started asking me what she looked like. And fair enough, I thought. If my lunatic friend said the same thing to me, I'd have some questions too. And I turned it into a joke and tried to steer the conversation away. But sometimes I get reminded. I see it again in my mind just as clearly as that night, and I'm still just as frightened, as confused as I was then. We all grew apart after that, but there, I said it. Maybe just getting it out of my head will finally make that memory go away. My parents own land that's on an ancient Navajo settlement, and last night we heard strange growling and yipping. We assumed it was dogs going after our neighbor's cats. We live in the country, so this is pretty normal. My dad grabbed his flashlight and a pistol. He walked down to the noises, and I ran around grabbing all of our cats. One was missing, so I grabbed another big flashlight and decided to walk around. Now, from my front porch to the left is my neighbor's house where my dad was with his gun. To the right was another pasture that we own, and this is heavily wooded at the property line. I shined my flashlight, looking over this pasture for my cat, and I was looking at the wood line, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't like those fake ones that are all white and weird. Mine, or my skinwalker, looked like Navajo folklore. This thing had a pelt over its head, its face pale and white, very deep white eyes with black iris, and its body was hidden. I immediately go into panic mode, looking back, turning up the flashlight, and it was gone. Not even 5 seconds later, super far away, I heard something, and It wasn't right. It sounded like something trying to mimic a human. It just didn't sound quite right to my ears. I heard something scream help with an ear-piercing volume, and the hairs on my neck stood up and my heart dropped. My mind was frozen and I just refused to move. I knew the rule: the further they sound, the closer they are, and my flashlight never stopped moving. I was horrified. My dad was too far away to tell, and I didn't want to yell and make things worse. And once my dad came back, I begged him not to go outside, and I wouldn't tell him what I saw because I knew that he was still looking for the other cat that I was. He started yelling because he didn't understand what was wrong and why I was so scared, and he grabbed his shotgun and ran out to look for the cat. He came back 10 minutes later and told me to tell him. When I did, his face ran pale. He didn't hear the same scream that I heard, but when I heard it, it went dead silent and he felt off. He said that he's heard things, but he knew that I wasn't lying. But what do we do now? I'm genuinely asking for help. I wish this was a lie. I wish that I was making this up, but I'm not. I'm full-blown terrified of what's out there. I grew up in a very old house in the Midwest that my parents got for a steal. It was originally built as a hotel, and the seller was very motivated to get rid of it. Now, growing up, weird things happen all the time. The typical malarkey that is easy to ignore for years and years. Footsteps, strange shadows, the feeling of being watched or followed. Swearing that you see someone in the room right as you wake up. The room in the basement that chills your blood every time for no reason, and the occasional hard-to-explain moments. I moved to the West Coast in my 20s for school and self-discovery. During a visit from my family, my sister told me that they had met a ghost in the house, and I was pretty skeptical, but my entire family backed her up. She was in her room and her radio had been acting up, so just on the off chance, she said, "Okay, if you are a ghost, could you please just stop it?" And the radio turned off. She waited a moment and then said, "Wait, if you are a ghost, turn it on." And the radio turned on. After some experimentation, they devised a system of communication. Volume up was yes, volume down was no. The digital readout on the volume was 0 to 30, so 1 was A, 2 was B, 3 was C, and so on. If the radio turned off, then it was a sort of hard no or off-limits question. And through this system, the ghost had explained that he wanted to be called Jason. He had died in the house in 1905 at age 5 when he was sick, and he lived in the house alongside us with his kind of mother and evil father. When they asked if he loved his father, the volume went to 0 and turned off. In fact, he refused most questions about his father. Apparently, he was the cause of the more malevolent experiences that people had in that house. I was definitely intrigued and went back home that year to visit for a chance to experience this for myself. However, when I arrived, Jason refused to interact with me. I would leave the table and the radio would pop on. My sisters would call me back and the radio would turn off instantly. He didn't want to have anything to do with me. As I thought about this, I remembered an experience I had before moving to the West Coast. I had been lying in bed one night when I felt a hand ruffle my hair playfully. I freaked out. I shot out of bed and turned on the light, pulled out my chest, and overconfidently yelled, "You do not know who I am or what I'm capable of. If you try that again, you'll regret it. Don't you dare mess with me." And then several picture frames on my desk flew off onto the floor belligerently, and I stayed at a friend's house that night. One night on my trip after Jason refused to talk to me, I spoke out loud, "Hey, I'm sorry if it was you who I yelled at that one night. I bet you were trying to play or introduce yourself to me and I got scared. I didn't need to be so mean to you, and I understand if you don't want to talk to me." The radio turned on. "Hey, are you the Jason I heard so much about?" And the volume went up. Did I yell at you that night before I left?" And the volume went up again and then went back down to a reasonable level. "I'm sorry about that. Can we be friends?" And the volume went up again. It was incredible. He had introduced himself to several family friends as well. And to prove he wasn't some sort of hacked radio, he would do additional tasks. He would ring our doorbell. He would push crayons around on the table. He even did a really incredible trick for us. You see, while asking about the logistics of being a ghost, he had volume up that he could travel anywhere almost instantly. And to test it, we called up a family friend on the West Coast. This friend put out a newspaper on their kitchen table, and Jason then visited them and came back to set the volume to the date on the paper. The radio turned off for a moment, then seconds later it set the volume to 17. The friend said, "So close. The paper was for the 18th. But Jason was not convinced. Volume up, volume down, 17. Volume up, volume down, 17, 17, 17, 17. The friend checked again and apologized. "Oh, he's right. I misremembered. It's the paper from the 17th. He refused to answer questions about God or religion, and he gave us a few answers that contradicted as well. He told us that he didn't need to sleep, but he had told my sister a few months earlier that he did. One thing he seemed to know was how long he would be there. Through the volume Ouija system, he told my sister that he would be around until her 28th birthday, then his family would move on to the next phase. At the time, this was a couple of years into the future, and sure enough, we never heard from him after that. During his time with us, he would occasionally visit our dreams. We would have these extremely realistic dreams where a boy in a white hooded robe would say hi to us, ask to play hide and seek with us, or ask us questions about ourselves. Then he would confirm with my sister that he had visited us. He used to play the radio primarily, but in the final year he got better at manipulating other electronics. He could make printers print messages. He could manipulate televisions. He even sent us texts in the last few months. My mother had texted me, "I see you, haha," when I was back in the West Coast a couple of years after all of this. And I texted her back, "Did you come out here to visit? Where are you?" But she was confused. She said she was in the Midwest at home, and her phone had no evidence of sending a text with that message to me. I texted back, "I think Jason has sent me a message. Hi, Jason." And I got a reply, "Hi," again, not from my mom. My sister even once got a call with a picture of Obama in the caller ID saying Mr. President, but there was nobody there when she answered and apparently no callback number. The radio confirmed with a volume up that Jason was just goofing around. It was a wild few years with that crazy kid haunting our devices. My family still has that radio out just in case, but it hasn't turned on in years, and my sister is now well into her 30s. I know this will be met with a lot of skepticism. Even I was very skeptical until I was able to meet him myself. However, I think it's finally time to share this and to answer questions people might have about it. So, what do you got? Ask me anything. Does my family still live in the house? Yes, they do. My mom and sister are around, and there's been no communication or experiences from Jason or the father since my sister turned 28. You realize Jason is a demon/lying spirit or malevolent entity sent to trick you, right? Maybe. We haven't ruled that out, but it felt pretty chill. And yes, I get that could be part of it. How did the parents die? It's unclear to us too. I wish we had found more info on them as well. Why didn't you record it? Well, we tried. Electronic recording was interfered with or might even glitch every single time. Jason didn't want to be recorded. Camcorders glitched. Phone video didn't save or seemed to be immediately deleted. Even audio recordings didn't work around the radio when he was active, or otherwise he would just turn off. Did you ever investigate the history or death records of the house? Did a boy named Jason actually live and die there? We did, and we found a record of a death of a 5-year-old boy from illness. His name was not Jason though, but everything else was in line with what he told us. How did a 5-year-old know how to read, write, and spell? Honestly, I have no clue, but he could. I personally always figured that he had picked up some tricks in the afterlife, but who knows? And others have theorized that if this family had this property at the time, they might have been socioeconomically at the top of the class back then, and he might have received a better education than most kids at that time, and who knows, maybe even comparatively to now. You expect us to believe this crap? Where's your proof? I expect some will believe and some won't, and that's fine with me. I'm not here to prove anything, I just thought it was a cool experience and figured some others would enjoy knowing about it too. So this just happened tonight. My son's birthday is today, and we are all currently quarantined due to being exposed to someone who was sick. And since we had to cancel our plans, we decided to take a drive. We love just driving around in the country and hiking and tressing about. We went to an old church/Masonic lodge. It's now not used at all. That is hometown famous for a big goat statue mounted on top of the steeple. The statue was a gift from someone in Dundee, Scotland. It's a very old place. No one was around, so my son and I decided to look around, and we got to ring this huge brass bell by pulling a rope. My boyfriend and other son were far away from us in the empty parking lot, and we left, and they were amazed at how loud the bell was. Now anyways, we kept driving and exploring until it got dark. My oldest son said that he wanted to stop at the graveyard, then go and ring the bell one more time. It's his birthday, so I said, "As you wish, my darling." And we walked the graveyard, paid respect to the extremely old graves, and even picked up trash. We always do this when hiking and exploring. Then, just down the road, we went back to the goat church/Masonic lodge. We pulled in. Again, no one around. This area is very open. The wide yard you walk across to get to the building is clear of trees. The church is right by the busy highway. No sidewalk, steep stairs. My boyfriend and I decided to stay by the van to smoke a cigarette, and I could see the black outlines of my two boys walking towards the front of the church. It's not super far, but it takes a minute to walk to the building due to the yard being quite mushy and kind of bumpy. Well, suddenly, out of nowhere, there were what looked like 3 more young men, teen boys, walking towards my kids and approaching them very quickly, as though they knew my kids. Well, my first thought was, okay, I better get over there and make sure these boys ain't up to no good, but I also thought, where the hell did they come from? I immediately walked toward them to make sure all was well. I heard the bell ring. Then suddenly, one of the unknown silhouettes charged my oldest son. As this happened, my boyfriend ran with his knife out yelling, "Hey," at the people. He ran around the corner to approach the group, and I followed behind him, but I wasn't as fast. As I reached the steps, my boyfriend and my kids were already running toward the car. There was no one there but my family, and I asked, "Where are they?" They just shouted, "Go, run, go Mom, run." And I repeated, "Where are those people?" as I ran. "There are no people, just go," they replied. So we did just that, skedaddling back to the car. On the way home, we, of course, talked about this very insane experience the entire time. We saw 3 people walk up to my kids, right next to them. It almost looked like they had planned to meet them there. They were walking as a group until one suddenly started running toward my son with intent, like I said, but my boys never saw them. There was no one there. There was no way they couldn't have noticed them, though. Nowhere for them to hide afterwards. The area is completely open with no hiding spots. The boys also described how when they reached the steps, everything felt very dreamlike. They got nervous and quickly rang the bell before my boyfriend got to them. Both of them rang it. This brass bell is old and loud, and it can be heard far and wide. And even though both boys rang it, I only heard it once, and I saw 3 people disappear. On the way home, my boyfriend and youngest son felt nervous and negative and scared the entire time, But my oldest son, the birthday boy, and I felt excited with no sense of malignancy whatsoever. My oldest and I have always loved all things paranormal, but tonight removed that last bit of doubt lingering in the back of my mind. I never thought something like this would happen, not just to me, but to my whole family. We prayed for protection on the way home and arrived safe and sound. But you never know, you guys, anything can happen. And I'm open to any and all theories, whether supernatural or pragmatic. I've gone through every possible scenario, but it just doesn't add up. This happened in 6th and 7th grade of middle school. I'm in high school now, and I am also living in a different state. One night I woke up while sleeping. It was probably 2 or 3 a.m., but it's hard to say. I was only awake for a few minutes. My curtains made it so during the night my room is just completely pitch black. I don't have any light source in my room, and when I turned to my left, at the foot of my bed, stood a woman in black. This Victorian dress with long, light-colored hair. I couldn't quite see her face. It was entirely shrouded in light, and she looked almost ethereal. I was super confused, sitting straight up in bed and just staring at her, and suddenly I felt super tired and dizzy. A wave of warmth washed over me, and kind of like the feeling that you get when someone hugs you. I went back to sleep, and when I woke up the next morning, I felt completely fine. I was weirded out, but for the most part, I thought it was just a weird form of sleep paralysis and really thought nothing of it. When I went to sleep the same day, that woman was there again. When I tried to talk to her, I managed to get out to who before I felt drained and fell back to sleep. It should be important to mention that throughout these 2 years that I never saw her convey any emotion. No sadness, anger, or happiness. I only saw her move 2 times. For months, I would see her, and it just became a part of my routine. I would wake up in the middle of the night, see her, feel dizzy, and go back to sleep. I wasn't really bothered by it either, since the sleep that I would get was probably the best sleep I had ever gotten in my life, and it felt like I was sleeping on clouds after I saw her. Each time I would try and talk or do something other than sit up and just stare, but she would always make me feel exhausted. One night I managed to take a hold of my pillow and raise my hand, aiming to throw it at her, when she reached out her hand and tapped my head. I think I literally blacked out after that, and this is the only time that I physically felt her. Her touch was very light on my head. Around a week later, I mustered up enough strength and threw that pillow at her. And like I said before, she was still emotionless. It went through her body easily, which scared me in the moment. This is the only time that I felt fear during the night with her. And while I was freaking out, she reached over and swiped at my shoulder. I couldn't feel it, but a few seconds later I felt so dizzy that I was nauseous. And the next morning I had red marks on my shoulder. Like I said, this went on for a long time. And at this point, I just let her make me go to sleep, and I just kind of lived my life with her. What could I even do? I don't really remember when, but one time during lunchtime I went into my bedroom and I saw her in my neighbor's window. Because of how my bedroom is positioned, I could see right into my neighbor's house, and that's the only time that I saw her in person. This was terrifying for middle school me. Once I calmed down, I went to the same neighbor's house to pick up my cat. Long story, but my cat loved going over to their house, and while I was over, I showed them the video and explained my experience, and asked if they had the same thing. They mentioned that their 10-year-old daughter had talked about a woman in the middle of the night, but they thought that it was just her imagination, and they also said that she went upstairs, sleeping, due to her having a small cold. After this, I never saw her again, and this happened in the summer of 7th grade. And since then, I moved from that house. Maybe she's found a new girl to haunt, or was angry that I was talking about her. I recently told my friend, who was the daughter of a pastor, and she was adamant that it was a demon. I never felt any ill intent from her, but I'm open to really any answer. It could also just be my imagination, which I guess looking back wouldn't surprise me either. When I was a kid, we lived in a small, isolated house on the edge of a half-developed neighborhood. There were only about 6 houses on our block, and ours was the last one before many overgrown weeds and empty land stretched out into the dark. At night, the area was deserted, and you'd rarely see anyone stepping outside. I lived there from the ages of 7 to 13, and looking back, it felt like I was trapped inside one of those disturbing, uncanny horror films where reality always seems just a little bit off. Before I dive into the incidents, it's worth mentioning that our life in that house was filled with a sense of suffocating dread. Financially, we struggled a lot during those years, drowning in debt. Strangely enough, things turned around for us as soon as we moved out. Family fights erupted daily, and I remember feeling terrified constantly. I remember not going too far into any room so that if anything jumps out, I could run through the door easily. I don't know why I did that, to be honest. Now, here are some of the events that made me believe that something was haunting us. Incident 1. The Unseen Watcher. I remember staying home from school one day because I was sick. I was curled up on the couch watching Barney and Friends, trying to distract myself from the eerie feeling of that house. At some point, I felt someone standing beside me. I assumed it was my mom joining to watch the show, so I didn't think much of it. A few minutes passed, and I casually asked her something. There was no response. I asked her one more time, and there was no response again, and I turned to find no one there. And that's when it hit me. My mom wasn't even home. She had left for work hours ago, and I was completely alone in that house. And this freaked me out, and I opened the front door and sat on the porch until my parents came home because it just felt so real. It truly felt like someone walked up and was actually standing there. Incident 2. The Yellow Ball and the Swarm. This incident happened to my sister, but I'll try to explain it in my point of view. We all used to sleep in the same room since our house only had one bedroom, and me and my sister would sleep between my parents to feel safe. One night, my sister was studying for her test in the living room, and at around 12:30 a.m., I was starting to fall asleep when suddenly my sister burst through the door, running and jumping on the bed, scared and crying. After calming her down, she told us what had happened. She was in the living room studying for a test when, out of nowhere, a yellow ball with a smiley face on it rolled into the hallway from the other room. As it came to a stop, dozens of cockroaches scurried out from the same room, like they do when they hear humans walking. Our house had a serious cockroach problem, and the floors practically came alive with them at night. She said a heavy sense of dread washed over her as she stared into that dark hallway, and then she saw it. A shadowy figure emerging from the darkness, moving in a way that made her feel cold all over. She told us that she felt stuck for a second and frozen in fear before running to the bedroom. Incident 3. The Disappearing Glasses. One morning, my dad couldn't find his glasses. He had recently undergone cataract surgery, so they were essential. The whole family spent what felt like hours scouring every inch of the house. We checked his shelf multiple times, which was where he usually kept them, but they were nowhere to be found. We left for school, defeated and convinced that the glasses were gone for good. But later that evening, as we were sitting around, my dad suddenly called out to my mom, sounding almost angry. We rushed over to find the glasses sitting right there on the shelf, exactly where we had checked over and over again. My dad thought that we were playing a prank on him, but we weren't. There was no explanation for how they could have reappeared like that, and it wasn't him pranking us either because he was so angry that day. Incident number 4. The Mysterious Fortune Teller. Okay, so this one is actually scary, so strap in. How would you feel if a random creepy-looking guy stood in front of your house and started chanting? Well, In South Indian culture, there's a figure known as the Kudu Gudupu Quran. I've not heard much about them, but they're like devotees of God who roam the streets and randomly tell fortunes to people. Most people avoid them, fearing that their predictions might bring misfortune. My first encounter with one of them was when I was young. I remember hearing a man singing some kind of religious song near our doorstep, literally a few meters away from our door. I went to check on it, but my mom quickly grabbed me from behind and told me to be silent and to not make any sound. We pretended like there was nobody home, and eventually he went away. I was so confused and asked my mom who he was, but she didn't explain and just sort of brushed it off. Years later, as the strange happenings in our house grew more intense, a similar figure began appearing near our house while my dad was home alone. For several days, this man stood near our door, chanting and seemingly delivering cryptic messages at night. Finally, my dad confronted him, telling him to stay away. I never saw the man again after that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his presence was somehow connected to the disturbances. Incident 5. The Chanting Yogi. My sister also had reoccurring nightmares while we lived there. She remembers one in particular that terrified her. She would wake up to a vivid vision of a figure, like a yogi or a mystic, sitting on her chest, chanting in an unknown language. She could feel his weight pressing down on her, making it almost impossible to breathe. And this vision plagued her until we left that house for good. We finally moved out of that place, and to our relief, the strange experiences almost entirely stopped. Our financial situation improved, the family conflicts became less frequent, and that constant creeping fear seemed to lift. I can't explain what was happening in that house, but living there always felt like I was stuck in a disturbing horror movie, one that I desperately wanted to escape. Do you think that there could have been something paranormal going on, or was it just the atmosphere of that place that was getting to our minds? And if you'd like to hear more stories from that house, let me know. I have plenty more. I'm from Ireland and live in England at the moment, and I'd never heard of any ancient giants before, or even skeletons that have been found in the past. However, I have a true story of actually seeing one. It was maybe 5 to 7 years ago on a trip to Ireland, not sure of the exact year per se, and a friend of mine and myself saw what looked like a giant walking across the motorway in Ireland after a visit to Tara. We were heading south after coming down from a visit to the hill of Torir in County Meath, Ireland. I was driving down the motorway, and I distinctly remember we passed a group of traveler caravans parked on the grass verge on my left side. After passing them, I could see somebody crossing the motorway ahead of the car. I first thought it might be somebody from the caravan side crossing over for some reason, but I could see this man, and he was huge. We both saw the man, the giant I'll just call it, clearly a man who was really tall, about 200 meters ahead of us as we were driving back to Dublin. And it was huge, beyond normal human height, maybe at least 10 feet, it was hard to say exactly, and it moved very slowly, with his head bowed, very slim, and took no notice of us, and as he was moving so slowly, that was the strangest thing. I thought it was somebody crossing the motorway, so I readied to brake as I was doing about 70 miles per hour. But as I approached him in the car, and this giant just got to the central reservation of the motorway, which was a large hedge, and just disappeared. My friend in the passenger seat was seeing it and said to be careful as we approached it, and we both saw the same thing at the same time and described the features of the person exactly. The strangeness about the man or being was the way he moved, very slow and lumbering, heavy, not fast at all, and he had long black hair with a top which went to knee length, but he had something under that as I couldn't see flesh. It was not a cape, but some sort of top. I can still see the image to this day, but the color was not apparent. The weather was clear and it was daylight. Taurier is a very spiritual place, and we visited the Stone of Destiny just beforehand. The stone is called Lisnafel. And so, all I can say is that's what we saw. Both of us. One of my best friends died of a drug overdose in 2020. He would have been a groomsman at my wedding in September of 2024, but I decided to leave his spot open because I don't believe anyone could ever truly replace him. I even had a set of groomsmen presents set aside to give to his dad when the wedding was over. During the planning for my wedding, a strange thing happened where the veterinarian's office I recently switched to turned out to be the one his parents used when he was a kid, and my fiancée, now wife, has a cat with the same name as his childhood dog. After we switched to his vet's office, my friend's dad started getting emails and automated text messages about his family dog that had passed away almost 10 years prior. When he went to the office to figure out what had happened, the vet's office didn't have an explanation as to why he got the notifications. They said, "It's an automated system. There's no reason why you would have started receiving those when they're supposed to go to this person." And this is when he figured out that I had recently started using this vet and that my wife has a cat with the same name as his deceased dog. He was immediately convinced that my friend was messing with the vet's computers trying to reach me. His dad called me and asked if I had any major life events happening, and I filled him in on my fiancée and that I was getting married soon. And he broke down crying and said, "I think Nolan is pissed that he can't be at your wedding." I struggled mentally throughout the wedding planning process because of how much I missed my friend and wished that he could be with us. A few weeks after the wedding, around my birthday in November, I had a vivid dream that I was helping a mutual friend of Nolan and I move from one house to another. When I exited the house to load up another car with boxes, Nolan was standing at the car holding the package that was his groomsman present. He held it up, smiled at me, and turned to walk away. I tried to run after him in my dream, but I couldn't run, as if my feet were glued to the ground. He walked off into the distance, and when I couldn't see him anymore, I woke up already crying. I am convinced my friend visited me in my dream to thank me for saving his spot on my groomsmen party. I've always had vivid dreams, so to speak. I always know when I'm dreaming, and I love it. Since I can remember, I got to know the term lucid dreaming, and I always look forward to sleep so that I can fly, and so on. Last night, though, was different. I was standing in my mom's apartment, and her back was turned against me. She was far away, but I could see her clearly. I shouted, "Mom," and she didn't answer me, so I yelled, "Hey, fatty!" And it looked like she heard me, but didn't know where the sound came from. She turned around, but still didn't look at me, and so I yelled, "Hey, fatty," again. I don't know why I yelled fatty. I've never called anyone that, and my mom is nowhere near overweight, so it was just a weird thing to yell. I remember waking up and felt bad that I was mean to her and was weirded out by everything. I told my husband, and he was laughing, saying, "Who cares? It was just a dream." My husband is nowhere near spiritual and doesn't believe in anything supernatural. I still called my mom just to talk to her, and the first thing she said after I said, "Hey, Mom," was, "Hey, honey, I had the weirdest dream. Someone yelled something at me, and I think they called me fat." She was on speakerphone, and my husband's jaw dropped, and I started shaking. I told her it was me. It wasn't a dream. If I didn't have my husband by my side, I would have gaslighted myself because I would think I was going crazy. But what is this? I've had dreams where my grandmother told me that I was having a baby girl. I didn't know that I was pregnant, and my grandma died at my birthday, so I've never met her. And she was right. It was a girl. I was pregnant, and it wasn't planned. And my daughter was born after her birthday. I'm still just shook by all of this, and I'm just curious if any of you have ever communicated through your dreams before. My boyfriend just told me this happened, and he said it happened within the last week. Our house is haunted, but this is freaking me out. I usually sleep on my left side, facing away from him in bed. On one particular night, I'd fallen asleep facing him while he was awake on his phone. He sat up for a moment and looked at me before realizing my eyes were wide open and I was trying to mouth something to him. He kept asking what? Huh? But I wasn't responding. He shined his phone screen on my face and my eyes were closed and my mouth was slightly open. But when he moved his screen light, he saw my eyes open and I was mouthing stuff to him again. He got so creeped out he almost slept on the couch, but decided to just face away from me and fell back asleep. And this has me rattled. The stuff in our house doesn't usually freak me out, but this has me pretty shaken up. His vision is good, even in the dark. I sleep with my eyes open sometimes and it's creepy, but it's not wide open and it doesn't stop once the light is on. I don't know what this could have been if it wasn't his eyes playing tricks on him, and I'm not convinced it was. I didn't believe in ghosts. The other night, my wife heard the sound of a dog toy coming from our living room. That was impossible because the dog was asleep in his crate in the laundry room. I got out of bed and went to check, and on my way back, I swear that I saw a goddamn image of a boy wearing white shorts and white shoes with black tips. He was sitting with his face buried in his knees, and I just said, nope, and ignored it, and went to bed. I don't mess with ghosts. I didn't share this with anyone because when I was growing up, the movie Ghostbusters basically taught me to just not mess with ghosts. And 20-some years later, I still remember that advice. Then, a day later, my 4-year-old suddenly had a new imaginary friend named Daniel, who only comes out at night. She said that he had been playing in the living room and sleeping on the couch for the last couple of nights, and I asked, "What does Daniel look like?" And she responds, "White shoes, but black on the fronts. White shorts. He wasn't feeling good the other night. His belly hurt and he was crying." And now I'm sitting in my room, questioning reality. Now, just to add to this, I inherited some furniture about 4 years ago. It had been sitting in the spare bedroom ever since, and within the last 2 weeks, I started refinishing the pieces. About 6 to 9 weeks ago, I remodeled the room. There was a lot of junk left over from my wife's grandmother, and most of it ended up in the closet where Daniel says he lives. We lived here for about 4 years, and before that, my wife's grandmother had lived here since at least the 1960s. We don't know much about the house before that. The records are very unclear. Some facts I figured I'd mention, since I've been asked quite a bit about this. Was I sleep deprived when I saw the figure in the living room? Honestly, no. I was pretty coherent. My wife had me thinking someone had broken in, so I was expecting to have to shoot someone. Daniel supposedly just wants to play and sleep a lot. We have cameras in the bedroom, but nothing is ever caught on video. However, motion is detected quite often, even though nothing is ever recorded, and I always assumed it was just the breeze. Now, a couple of days ago, my daughter randomly said that Daniel went to heaven. It was completely out of the blue. My wife and I had never really talked to her about Daniel. We just figured if we ignored it, it would go away on its own. And I remember my daughter saying, "He told me goodbye. He said he was going to heaven." Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. EST, and there are super fun live streams on Sundays and Wednesday nights. If you got a story, be sure to submit them over my email, letsreadsubmissions@gmail.com, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks for members of the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories and big compilations located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, be sure to charge your rose toy under the full moon.